Welcome back to Chow Time Pods. Your host, Red. I got a video today from KaitWillett.
In February 2026, a woman invited 400 men into a mansion and slept with as many as she could, on camera, for money. Then, she announced she was pregnant, with 3 possible fathers, no idea which. Her name is Bonnie Blue, and this isn't about judging her. She is the clearest picture that we have around what modern dating has become. Now here's what this video is going to uncover. Women have never been less emotionally aware about a relationship, and as a consequence, men have slowly backed away from committing, and for many, they've stopped showing up completely. Nobody trusts anyone, and the most connected generation in history is the loneliest ever recorded. And while it might feel random, it isn't. It's one system collapsing. And a philosopher named Arthur Schopenhauer predicted this whole thing in 1851. But at the end of this video, you'll know exactly what broke, who it's hurting most, and why you were right, that something here is deeply wrong. Now, before the 5 pillars, you need to know exactly who Schopenhauer was, because this is real philosophy, not internet commentary. He was a German philosopher writing in 1851, laying out a framework that reads like he knew exactly what was going to happen in our society. He wrote a work called Parerga and Paralipomenia, and inside it, there's a section called Aphorisms on the Wisdom of Life. And in that section, he lays out 3 categories of honor. The first is civic honor, the mutual agreement to respect other people's rights so that they respect.
See, this is what we're lacking in the United States now, is this respect for the rights to respect others. This is what we're sorely lacking here.
Yours. And this is the foundation of a functioning society. The second is official honor, the expectation that a person who's holding positions of authority is qualified to be holding it. The third, and the one he spent the most time on, is sexual honor. And here's what separates Schopenhauer from every other talking head on the internet. He wasn't making a moral argument. In his words, all honor really rests upon a utilitarian basis. Utilitarian, it exists because it works, because it holds something together. He did not call sexual honor sacred. He didn't even call it God-given. What he did call
I don't call it those things. I think a lot of people that aren't Christians don't see it those things.
it was functional. And then he describes exactly how it functions. He wrote that women, collectively, developed what he called an esprit de corps, a group strategy. And the strategy itself was simple. No woman gives herself to a man except in marriage, enforced collectively, and every man would be, in his words, forced to surrender and ally himself with a woman. And
Correct.
through that arrangement, provision was guaranteed for an entire female race. Sit with that for a second. Schopenhauer was arguing that sexual honor in itself was a female strategy, collectively, to secure long-term commitment, resources, and protection from men. And
it makes total sense, right? Because back in caveman days, how would they ever secure these things?
it only worked if every woman participated. Not fair, not beautiful, not cinematic, just the deal, the structure. And it held 5 things in place. And when that broke, all 5 broke with it. The first thing sexual honor held together was commitment. Schopenhauer described a transaction, and that word feels cold, especially against partnership. But to his defense, he was being honest about what sat beneath the surface. Women maintained sexual exclusivity. Men, in exchange, committed fully. Resources, protection, long-term partnership. Now, I want to be clear, this is not some modernized red pill talking point. This is a philosopher in
Red pill is not something new, right? It's just the truth, right? This is why I always think when people say, oh, red pill talking, no, it's just age-old wisdom talking points that finally got labeled into a red pill.
1851, describing the architecture of the deal. Man undertaking responsibility for all women's needs and also for the children that spring from their union, an arrangement on which is based the welfare of the whole female race. Both sides had something to lose, and that was the entire point. And the women who broke this agreement, they didn't only affect themselves. She is false to the terms upon which the male capitulated, and as her conduct is such as to frighten other men from making a similar surrender. It imperils the welfare of all of her sisters. Frighten other men from making a similar surrender. When men see that the deal is broken, they stop making the deal. And that in itself doesn't...
Yes, that is totally what we see nowadays. Men see the deal, and the deal is not worth it. This is why men have walked away from this deal.
hurt one woman. It hurts all women because the system only works if men believe that the terms are reliable. Now, look where we are. The General Social Survey has tracked sexual behavior in the United States for decades. Among women born before 1910, only 3% had 2 or more sexual partners before marriage. 3% by the 1940s.
Damn. 3%? That's crazy.
Birth cohort, that number was 26%. The median number for lifetime sexual partners for women doubled from 2.6 for women born in the 1940s to 5.3 for women born in the 1970s, a twofold increase in one generation. And the shift was sharper among women than it was for men. By 2013, the CDC found that the gap between men and women in relationship to their lifetime sexual partners was no longer statistically significant. The numbers converged. On a population level, women's sexual behavior became almost indistinguishable from men's, statistically speaking. That's the Esprit de Corps dissolving in the data. Schopenhauer's structure.
He's right? Men don't see the deal anymore. Why should we keep up with the deal? No more marriage.
Collapsing in real time, measured across generations. And here's what followed. Less than half of American households now include a married couple. 47.1% as of 2024, down from 78.8% in 1949. The average age of first marriages among men is about 30 years old, where for women, it's about 28. And that is the highest ever recorded in American history. And according to the Institute of Family Studies, nearly 3/4 of women, 74%, and two.
Like she says, oh, it's not just some red pill talking points. And it's just like, no, they're not red pill talking points. They're just talking points that kind of agree with what red pill says.
2/3 of men, 64%, between 22 and 35, reported that they hadn't dated or had only dated a few times in the last year. The report's own name for this is the dating recession. Not my words, the Institute of Family Studies in 2026. And here's the part that nobody really wants to say out loud. Half of these young adults, 51%, said that they actually wanted to start a relationship. They want it, they're just not doing it. The gap between desire and action is exactly what Schopenhauer was describing in 1851, 175 years ago. The deal dissolved. Without collective enforcement of exclusivity, men stopped reading commitment as a rational trade. Why surrender your freedom, your resources, your future, when the terms of the commitment are no longer guaranteed?
Correct.
When the structure that once incentivized commitment completely disappears, commitment disappears with it. And again, the people most affected by this are women. This entire system
Definitely
was
not us.
designed to benefit them. It was their strategy, and they abandoned it. If you've ever felt like everybody says that they want a relationship, but nobody knows how to actually build one, you're not imagining that. The gap is the exact thing that Schopenhauer described, and you are standing inside of it right now. But the people who cannot pair up are not the ones who pay the most. The heaviest cost falls onto the people who never had a say in any of it. And the numbers there are worse than almost anybody is willing to say out loud. The second thing that sexual honor held together was children. The system was never only just about the two adults who were making the deal. It was about what the deal produced. Children born into a structure where both parents were invested, where the man's commitment included responsibility for the offspring, and where the woman's commitment and honor gave the man confidence that the women's children were his. Now that might sound really uncomfortable in 2026, but that is what the mechanism was. Paternity confidence was the engine underneath a lot of this. Without it, the man's surrender made almost no common sense, especially biologically. And Schopenhauer was very blunt about what happened when women broke this commitment. Any girl who commits a breach of the rule betrays the whole female race, because its welfare would be destroyed if every woman were to do likewise. The punishment was social exile. She'd be cast out with shame and avoided like the plague.
I mean, this is how it used to be for single mothers, right? Single mothers used to be very outcast in society back in the day.
Not cruelty for its own sake, enforcement. Because if one woman could break the structure without competence, the whole system weakened. Now look where we are. 1 in 4 American children, roughly 19 million kids, are growing up within a household without their biological, step, or adoptive father. The United States has the highest rate of children living in single-parent households of any nation in a 130-country global study. That's more than 3 times the global average. And this isn't static. The number of children in father-absent homes has more than doubled since 1970. roughly half of Black children, 29% of Hispanic children, and 20% of white children currently live in homes with no father present.
Asians aren't studied on this one, huh?
Now, these are Census Bureau numbers published by the National Institute of Demographic Studies, and the outcomes are measurable. Children in fatherless homes face statistically higher rates of poverty, behavioral problems, lower educational attainment, and incarceration. Now,
I mean, this is the Black community, right? This is a big stark difference between the Black community and most other communities, is the fatherlessness. And Asian communities, we weren't even up there, so I guess ours was really low, and that's probably why Asians have the most affluent money earners in the demographic and stuff.
Now, here's where Bonnie Blue becomes relevant again. 3 men believe that they might be the father of her child. She filmed the ultrasound. She monetized the announcement. Paternity confidence here doesn't approach zero. It gets turned into content. Schopenhauer described a system where children were a product of mutual investment and mutual certainty. What we're looking at now is a world where a child can be conceived in a room with 400 different strangers, and the question of who the father is becomes a form of entertainment. Now, Schopenhauer, he wouldn't be surprised. He named this mechanism. When the esprit de corps dissolves, when paternity confidence collapses, when commitment becomes optional, children are the first collateral damage every single time. And here's what makes this really hard to talk about. The conversation around fatherhood has become so politically loaded to the point where stating basic, clear census data feels controversial. But again, these aren't value judgments. True. These aren't opinions. They're data. They are structural outcomes. Remove the structure that incentivized a 2-parent investment, and what do you get? Fewer 2-parent homes. The children didn't choose this. The structure failed them. And whether or not you plan to ever have children, you are dating and building a life inside of this culture that produces these outcomes. The odds a relationship lasts, the level of trust in which you start from, all of this was shaped by whether the structure held in homes like the ones that you grew up in. Now,
I've always said it. Marriage was always kind of a basis for children. It's the best possible way for children to be raised to become the most productive member of society. Without 2-parent households, that goes away.
Here's the part that turns this whole story around. Everybody assumes that a system or a structure like this was created to serve men. It didn't. It was created to support the group that is now paying the consequences for this collapse. And once you truly objectively look at who that is, this argument stops being the one that you expected. The third thing that sexual honor held together is the one thing most people don't want to listen to. The esprit de corps existed to protect women. As a class, as a group, its entire focus was to give women security and leverage over men. And Schopenhauer was not subtle about this. Women have to band together with a show of esprit de corps and present one undivided front to their common enemy, man, who possesses all the good things of the earth in virtue of his superior physical and intellectual power, in order to lay siege to and conquer him, and so get possession of him and a share of those good things. Common enemy. Lay siege, conquer. This is extreme framing, but outside of the language, look at what he's actually describing. The only leverage women had historically, the ability to control access to sex in exchange for long-term commitment. That was the strategy, and it worked precisely because it was collective. Because one woman acting alone has no real power. Women acting together creates scarcity, and scarcity creates leverage. That leverage is what forced men to agree to the commitment of the terms. And he was very clear about what happened to any woman who broke this rank. She is cast out with shame as one who has lost her honor. No woman will have anything more to do with her. She is avoided like the plague. The punishment in this did not come from men. It came from other women. Because every woman who broke the rule, she weakened the leverage for all women. Collective enforcement for collective benefit. Now again, look what happened when this dissolved. A study published in Evolutionary Psychology in July 2025, spanning 5,331 participants across 15 samples in 11 countries. What they found was the number of past sexual partners is inversely correlated with how desirable they are as a long-term partner. Meaning, the higher the body count is, the less willing people are to commit. And this held regardless of gender. There was no meaningful double standard in this data. Meanwhile, 83% of women say that they prefer a committed relationship in comparison to uncommitted sex. 83%. 8% of them. And counselors who do work with students report that there's a long-term monogamous relationship described, almost without exception, as a desired goal. So women overwhelmingly want committed partners, but the system designed to produce them is almost gone. And you might ask, what replaced it? Well, OnlyFans now hosts an approximate 4.6 million creators. The majority of them, women, commodifying sexual access for profit instead of collective leverage. And women's self-reported levels of happiness has also declined, both absolutely and relative to men's, especially since the 1970s. That's Stevenson and Wolfers.
This study we see quite often.
Out of Yale and Wharton. Peer-reviewed, real data. The unspoken agreement that women had was women collectively controlling access to protect every woman's future and their children. When it broke, yes, women gained independent sexual freedom, but they lost collective bargaining power. The marketplace shifted from what are you offering to earn exclusive access into how do you compete for attention in a market that has no barrier to entry. And I want to be clear because I already know what the comments are going to say. So you want me to go back to the 1950s? No, I want you to understand what you lost so that you can make an informed choice about what comes next. You cannot fix anything if you refuse to acknowledge what caused it to break. Because Schopenhauer, he called this utilitarian, and he was right. The esprit de corps was a utility. It performed a function. And when it was removed, nothing replaced the function. Women were told they gained freedom. And in some important ways, they did. But freedom without structure is just chaos with better branding. And data, it shows what's actually happening.
What do we always say? Women are chaos.
Happening in the outcomes, not what you're told is happening on TikTok. Women report consistently being less happy now than they were when the system was intact. That is a measurable result. And the people most harmed by the collapse of female collective strategy are women. Now, whether you're a man or a woman, you are standing in the exact market that this collapse has created. And you can feel the difference even if you haven't been able to directly tie a number to it. But underneath the leverage and the freedom, the old system quietly produced one more thing, and it doesn't show up in marriage rates or happiness scores. You likely can't even point to it directly. And most people, they only notice it after it's already gone. The last thing that sexual honor held together was trust. This one is harder to quantify, but that doesn't mean it's not the most important. Because Schopenhauer's entire framework of honor, all three categories, they rest on the same principle. Shared expectations produce cooperative behavior. Civic honor worked because people agreed upon what was fair. Official honor worked because people agreed on what qualified somebody, especially to be in a position of power. And sexual honor worked because both sexes agreed to the terms. Men knew the deal, women knew the deal, and everybody operated inside the framework. And that shared framework created something fragile that we don't talk about enough. Trust between men and women as groups. Now, again, look where we are. In 1972, 46% of Americans
don't trust women and women don't trust men.
Said that most people can be trusted. By 2018, that number dropped to 34%. In a 2023 and 2024 Pew survey, it was still 34%. 25% of men ages 15 to 34 report feeling lonely a lot of the time. This is the highest rate of any country in the OECD. In no other country is the gap between male loneliness, especially in young men, compared to everybody else, as wide as it is here. 15% of men now report 0 close friendships, a 5-fold increase since the 1990s. And among men,
I have 3.
Under 30, more than 1 in 4 said they have no close social connections at all. And here's the number that puts it all together. 44% of single young men say that they fear being labeled as creepy, and that makes them less likely to approach women. At the same time, 77% of women, ages 18 to 30, say that they wish men would approach them more. Let's put those numbers together again side by side. Men are afraid to engage. Women are waiting for engagement, and neither side trusts the other one enough to close that gap. When the shared rules dissolved, what replaced them wasn't true freedom. It was suspicion. Men and women stopped trusting each other because the shared framework that they had was no longer there. Everybody's playing by different rules.
This is true. Like before, I was like, oh, what are we doing? Oh, we're going to build a family. We're going to have kids. We're going to do this together. We're going to build together. This is the family we're going to build. Now it's, what can I get from you without me giving you anything?
In reading.
And then that works both sides. Like men are doing that too, right? Men are like, how do I get that cat without having to give up as much resources as possible?
Every interaction through a different lens. Men, they're calculating risk before they ever open their mouths. And women,
we are calculating machines nowadays, aren't we? Just constantly, Yes.
are sitting there wondering why nobody's approaching them. And neither group truly understands and is willing to accept why the other one is behaving the way that it is. Schopenhauer's sexual honor conversation, on its principle, it gave both sexes a map. You might not have loved the map. You might even wanted a different map, but at least it told you where you were standing. And right now, nobody knows where they're standing. And the result is a generation that is more digitally connected than any generation before, yet more isolated relationally than any generation we've ever measured. And if talking to somebody that you're actually attracted to feels heavier than it should, that's not a flaw in you. It is what happens when two groups stop sharing the same rules. So we're all trying to play a game where nobody can agree upon how it works. Now, underneath all four of these things sits a fifth. And it's the one thing Schopenhauer cared about more than any of the first. It's also the hardest to defend in front of a modern audience, because at first, it's going to sound like the opposite of freedom. The fifth thing that sexual honor held together was restraint itself. To understand this one, you must understand.
I think this is a good one, yeah. I think restraint itself is good for people in general.
And Schopenhauer beyond this essay. His broader philosophy, laid out in the world as will and representation. It was built on a single idea. The will, the blind, insatiable force of desire that drives all living things. He argued that this will, this appetite, this impulse, it was the root of all suffering. And not because wanting things is wrong, but because the will has no off switch. It always wants more. And if that's left unchecked, it will destroy everything around it.
So pretty much hypergamy was what he's speaking about, right? Like they put a check on hypergamy, the way that women could not operate the way they can operate now.
Civilization, in his view, was the set of structures that channeled the will. That said, you can want, but you can't just take. You have desires, but you have to earn the right to act on them. And sexual honor was one of those structures. It took the most powerful human impulse and it placed it inside a framework of rules, consequences, and mutual obligation. Restraint in that context, it wasn't repression, it was architecture. It was what made cooperation between the sexes.
I mean, architecture itself is restraint, right? It is a space that is covered or blocked off from all other spaces. So, makes sense.
Possible. Now look where we are. 87% of men between the ages of 18 and 35, they view pornography at least once a week. Among women in the same age group, 28.5%.
Porn is up there nowadays. I agree. I personally watch it every so often.
The average boy is exposed to pornography as early as 10 years old.
I admit, when I grew up, I was exposed to this stuff pretty damn early.
Or most boys have ever had a real conversation with a girl about what a relationship even looks like. A simulation of sexual access introduced before any framework for what real connection requires. In 1990, 55% of American adults ages 18 to 64 reported having sex at least once a week. By 2024, that number had fallen to 37%. We live in the most sexually accessible environment in human history. Porn is free. Dating apps are everywhere. Hookup culture is mainstream. And people are having less sex than at any point since we started.
Which is crazy to think, right? You think people there just smacking each other left and right, just causing diseases.
Started measuring this. Among adults 18 to 29, 24% report having zero sex in the last year. That's double the rate from 2010. So we have more access, less connection, and that's the product of a culture that removed the structure and never replaced the function. Schopenhauer would look at this day and say, of course, the will without any form of structure doesn't lead to satisfaction. It leads to consumption. And consumption without meaning or restraint, that doesn't produce connection.
That's exactly the entitlement that women are in right now. Pure consumption with no restraints.
Produces addiction. And pornography is the clearest example of this. Stimulated sexual access with zero risk, zero vulnerability, zero investment. And 87% of men consume it weekly because the structure that once channeled desire towards partnership with boundaries and restraint and commitment and honor, that's gone. And what filled the void is a multi-billion-dollar industry built to exploit the will with no friction. The old system said, you can have this, but you must sacrifice something in order to have it, aka you have to earn it. The new system says you can have stimulation for free and You never have to do anything to earn it. And then we act confused as to why real, true, honest relationships aren't forming. Schopenhauer described the will as a central force of human existence. And he described civilization as a set of structures that are designed to channel it. And sexual honor was one of the most important channels. It took the strongest drive that humans have, and it placed it inside of a container with rules, expectations, and mutual accountability. If you remove the container, the drive doesn't go away. What it does is it finds new outlets: porn, parasocial relationships, apps optimized for swiping rather than connecting. These outlets that feed the will without ever actually satisfying it. Because the will, as Schopenhauer told us, is insatiable if there's no underlying meaning.
No, it makes, again, this is hypergamy, right? Like, everybody wants the best always, right? Until you realize, no, I can't get the best always. I have to constrain myself to what I have and be happy.
Associated with it. No honor, no boundaries, no rules, no restraint. It will always want more. And unfortunately, it will consume whatever you put in front of it. The old system said, you want this, then you need to become somebody worth committing to. The new system says, here's a simulation, and you never need to become anything in order to have it. And we're measuring the results in real time. And if you find yourself listening to this in the generation that has access to more things than any generation before you, yet still feeling emptier than you expected or were promised to, that's not a personal failing. That's your desire with nothing purposeful to channel it in. The structure was removed, and you're the one who's paying for it. With all 5 laid out side by side, the pattern here is impossible to miss. 5 things this structure was holding up, and 1 question left that the people who are arguing about this every single day refuse to touch. Schopenhauer never predicted Bonnie Blue. He never predicted OnlyFans, or swiping, or sexting, or meaningless relationships. He described a structure. He described what it was holding together, and he described in precise detail what would unravel when it came apart. Commitment would become conditional, and the men would stop surrendering when the terms felt unreliable. Children would lose the stability of 2 invested parents. Paternity confidence would erode, and with it, the incentive for lifelong fatherhood. Women would lose collective bargaining power. Individual sexual freedom would come at the cost of group leverage, and the people most harmed by that trade-off would be women themselves. Trust between the sexes would collapse, because without shared rules, the only thing left to take its place is suspicion. And a culture that was previously built on honor, values, and restraint would be replaced by a culture built on entitlement and impulse, desire without structure, access without investment, consumption without connection. Now he wasn't a prophet. He was an engineer reading a blueprint. He looked at the load-bearing walls and told us what they were holding up. The building fell exactly where those walls were. And the part that should bother you most, he told us in 1851 that sexual honor was utilitarian, that it didn't survive because it was moral. It survived because it worked. And we didn't replace it with something better. We didn't build a new system, new rules, and new structures. We didn't replace it with anything to hold together commitment, family, female security, social trust, or restraint. We just removed it. And we told ourselves that removing it was the same thing as progress. The truth is, the data doesn't care what we call it. Now, to be clear, Schopenhauer wasn't a fantastic person. He was difficult, often cruel, pessimistic, cynical, and he held a lot of views about women that people today would find offensive. I'm not here to rehabilitate him. I am here to tell you that his structural analysis was accurate. He described...
This is why I always say, there's sometimes I cover certain creators that you guys don't like, but it's okay. You know, like sometimes, even though you don't like the person, they might be worth hearing out.
A machine. He described its moving parts, and he described with uncomfortable precision what would break if he tried to take the machine apart. We took it apart, and now we're standing in the wreckage blaming one another for the collapse, instead of asking each other the only question that actually matters: what do we build next? Because something has to. The old structure seems to be gone, and I'm not certain it's coming back. But the 5 things it was holding together, commitment, children, female security, trust, and restraint, they still matter. They still need a container. And right now, they don't have one. So the question isn't, was Schopenhauer right? He was. The question is, what are we going to do about the fact that he was? Now, if this was worth your time, send it to somebody who needs to see it. And for more analysis like this, real philosophy and real data used to actually understand what's happening between men and women right now, subscribe.
Shout out to Kate for caring about society, making wonderful videos like this for educational purposes, and even giving the question out there, how do we fix this? What do we build next? That is important if we actually care about our children, our future, our women, and our men, right? Let's see what we can do. Please like, subscribe, comment down below. I really appreciate that, and catch you guys next time. Ciao.